The following is a hoop ball presentation.
Guys, welcome back. It is I, Lyle Swithenbank, back with another episode of the Pelicans Scoop on the Hoop Ball Pels podcast. Hoop-ball.com, as always. Lyle Swithenbank on Twitter, at hoopballpels on Twitter as well. Big episode again today. A couple of weeks ago, I had a chat with Mason Ginsberg of the Bourbon Street Shots and In The Know podcast. Guy is all across the Pelicans, and we had a really good chat about it. This was probably midway through the hiatus, and I've held it back because now we've got news that the NBA is coming back. Very, very excited that is going to happen. So we'll be looking at the 30th of July for that to restart. And the Pels are going. They're in the hub. They're going to the Yacht Club is where they'll be staying at Walt Disney World. So we're very, very excited to see that. Zion's going to be there. BI will be there. Well, we hope so. They've got until the 24th of June to opt out if they're not going to come. But fingers crossed that it all comes together and we see them there. So fingers crossed they can chase down the Memphis Grizzlies and make it into the 8th seed and play playoffs. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into our little chat with Mason. Hope you enjoy. Guys, welcome back to the Pelicans Scoop. I am Lyle Swithenbank, and today I'm joined with the great Mason Ginsberg from In The Know. Mason, how you going?
Good. I don't know about the whole great thing, but it's we're living, just taking it one day at a time. We're all quarantined up and ready to talk some Pelicans. I can't watch basketball, so I may as well talk about it, right?
Yeah, exactly right. I know the exact same feeling. I'm working from home duties now for coming up to nearly 3 months, I think now. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel in Australia. We're starting to ease restrictions a little bit, but I know, I've heard from the news that the US is still pretty locked up in certain places, and there's still a fair bit of this COVID going around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Chicago, and it's probably one of the worst areas in the country to be, and so we're one of the most infected places in the country at this point. I don't think we're opening up anytime soon. I know New Orleans actually has it's kind of they're in phase 1, I think, or at least getting close to phase 1 of reopening, and so that's good. But yeah, it's going to be a little while still, I think, up here.
It's crazy times that we're all living in. I mean,
yeah.
This is a Pelicans podcast, so it makes it a lot more difficult to talk about the Pelicans when there's not really much going on. We're sort of on this hiatus. We're lucky that we've had such a, I suppose, roller coaster of a season and off season coming in into this year. We started off this off season, I suppose, with the acquisition of David Griffin. He rebuilt pretty much the entire front office and training staff and everything like that. AD, the conundrum with him, I suppose, came to a head, and he was shipped off to the Lakers, and we've seen him go from strength to strength there. We also acquired a few young guys from there. We saw Brandon Ingram took a real leap. What did you think of his development this year?
Yeah, I mean, it was great, and man, that was last summer. It feels like it was like 10 years ago at this point. but yeah, I mean, Ingram's been fantastic. I was ready. I was ready to eat crow about a month into the season. I was not that high on him when he came in. I was actually highest on Lonzo Ball, and that flipped pretty quickly once when the season started. Of course, Lonzo's made tremendous strides as of late, but yeah, I mean, Ingram has really the one thing you held out and hope to, but from coming over from the Lakers, was that he wasn't really optimized. He wasn't used properly alongside LeBron James. He couldn't really find himself, so to speak. And so, I think the Pelicans put him in a position to succeed. Obviously, the shooting came along. What he needed to really unlock a lot of his game was developing that 3-point stroke. And I think there were signs, as opposed to Lonzo, where like he's been not a great shooter and so all of a sudden became a great shooter overnight, apparently. But Ingram was always kind of like you thought he could get there, but didn't know if or when it would happen, and it certainly has. And so that 3-point stroke and the willingness to take them, I think his 3-point rate, so the number of threes he takes in per 100 possessions or per has really gone up a solid clip. And so teams have to worry about that. And you have to close out on him. And so he's got more room to operate. And so, I mean, I think there's been, a lot of reasons that he's improved. Credit the coaching staff that put him in position to succeed. Mostly credit Brandon Ingram for putting in the work and really turning things around where, he still had a lot of potential, obviously, but he really is starting to realize that now. And I think he set himself up for a nice contract in his restricted free agency talks this offseason.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Lonzo Ball, another guy that came into the season. I suppose they talked that he'd rebuilt his jumper. First few games, he was a bit wayward. I think it looked like he was still trying to work out the mechanics of it all, especially in a game situation. Then come December, he just sort of took this real turn. Like you said, his numbers went through the roof. He started actually making good shots. Do you think that comes down to it finally clicking, or do you think he might have had an injury or something like that earlier on in the season? Was there any underlying reason there that he didn't come in as hot as he got to?
Well, I mean, he didn't get much of an offseason because he was hurt, and so I think that certainly played a part. I don't think either end of the spectrum we saw of Lonzo Ball this season is reality. I don't think he's nearly as bad as what we saw at the start of the year. I don't think he's going to be a nearly 40% three-point shooter in perpetuity going forward. I mean, I think that's pretty volatile. I think the three-point shooting, and I think he's certainly gotten better. And I think he's a guy now. He's not, you're going to have to pay attention to him when he's behind the arc. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the Pelicans style really helps him. The fast pace, you kind of see that he's more in his element when they're playing a run and gun style. That free flowing offense that Alvin Gentry likes to play. In the half court, he struggles. I mean, I think that's a secret. That's still the case. He doesn't really get into the paint that much. He struggles to really penetrate and initiate offense that way. That's why it's so important to have a guard like Drew Holiday alongside him who can really get into the paint and cause disruption. Even Brandon Ingram, who's been kind of at times been a decent point forward to help in that regard. But I mean, I think the way this team likes to play, his value is maximized, and so I'm excited to see how he can grow with this team. Either at the end of the season, if they ever end up resuming, or next season.
Yeah, and I think eventually he hopefully figures it all out. And especially, like you said, he had Drew alongside him, and that's the sort of guy you can't discount that mentor, I suppose, even on the court mentor sort of relationship. You can mirror someone else that is playing a similar position. Drew's been around the league for a long time. There was talk from David Griffin. I remember him giving a quote earlier on in the offseason about this is Drew's team and we're going to let him do whatever he wants. He can go and he can become the MVP. He can score when he wants. I don't think Drew was ever that sort of player that, I suppose, wanted to dominate a team. You know what I mean? He's always been a sort of lead by example point guard, whether that is go and score a bucket or it is defer to whoever the hot hand is. Do you think he sort of kept that going and let the young guys get theirs when they needed to and then took control when it was his turn?
Yeah, I mean, the trick with Drew, and I appreciate and respect Griff doing that for him, but I think that it's a fair comment that Drew Holiday, first of all, they're asking him to do a lot, right? He's the advanced metrics show that he guards opposing teams' best players at one of the highest rates in the league. And so he's spending a ton of effort on defense every night. And now Anthony Davis is gone. All of a sudden you want him to be the guy on offense too. And it's just a lot. I mean, it's a lot for a player like Drew. It's a lot for anyone. But especially now you've lost your defensive anchor in AD, who's good at covering up mistakes around the perimeter. I mean, not to say Drew, for example, but the other guys are on the perimeter. The Pelicans defensively were never that good alongside Drew. And so now he's got to be that guy on both ends. And I think he took it to heart and he took his lumps in the beginning of the season. He didn't really come through in the clutch a lot of the time. And that did carry through a little bit throughout the course of the entire season. But, I think the development of Brandon Ingram, the introduction of Zion to the team and how he's been able to take some of the load and even clean up people's misses. I mean, we saw his second jump and his offensive rebounding skills really, really helpful in that regard as well. I think Drew did force a little bit as the team really came together. Drew is still being the Drew that they asked him to be at the start of the season. He's forcing a little bit, maybe taking taking some threes, taking some early shot clock shots that he maybe shouldn't be taking. But that's really my only gripe with Drew throughout the course of the season. He was just at the start of the year when the team was kind of a shell of itself. They just asked him to do a lot, and he did as best he could. And he's not that alpha. He's never been that guy. But I really do feel like he did what he needed to do for the Pelicans to be the best version of themselves. And as the season got on, they got healthy. I think all the guys really started to figure out their role in all this. And it's a shame the season had to be cut off when it did, because I feel like this team was really cruising.
That final stretch, I guess, was chalk and cheese, I suppose. They really did turn it on. They looked like they were making a push for the playoffs, and then all of a sudden, almost overnight, well, it was just about mid-game that they're just like, no, we're off. Rudy Gobert from the Jazz had been tested positive, and all of a sudden alarm bells go off because we didn't really know what we were dealing with. Do you think if the season had continued, that this young, youthful, athletic, I mean, we haven't even touched on Zion yet. We'll get to him. I'm just trying to taper expectations for everyone because once they get going, do you think that we could have made that jump into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think it was a coin flip. I really do. And that's essentially what. So John Hollinger joined Will Guillory of The Athletic for a Q&A on one of his recent articles about a week or so ago. And that's really what Hollinger said. And so I feel like, getting an unbiased kind of neutral third-party perspective on that is nice, because you get Pelicans fans think, oh, we would have definitely made it. You get Grizzlies fans say, are you kidding? You're 3.5 games back. You're never going to make it. And so, I mean, I really do think the difference in strength of schedule was significant, but a 3.5 game lead is also significant. And I really do believe that it was – I would have given the slight edge to the Pelicans. I think that just because the strength of schedule difference was massive. The Pelicans had the easiest schedule remaining in the league. Memphis, I think, was one of the toughest, if not the toughest. And I think the Pelicans were a little bit healthy. I think the Memphis was getting healthy, but still not perfectly healthy yet. The Pelicans were missing JJ Redick, but he was supposed to be back in about a week at that time. And so, I think they were playing at such a high level that they would have. I think they would have carried through, and so they had 3 games left out of 18 against teams over 500. So there was a back-to-back against Utah and the Clippers, and then the third to last game of the season was against Philly. And you could even maybe argue that Philly was already going to have their playoff seeding set, and they may have just rested players. So the Pelicans were in a sweet spot, and I think I would have given this slight edge to them, but it was going to be a battle to the finish that I was really excited to watch, and it probably would have come down to those last 2 head-to-head games between Memphis and New Orleans.
Yeah, that was exciting to see, and both similar sort of teams in that they're full of young guys, and I think surprised a lot of people as to how quickly this team sort of came together. I think it was 7 new players, I think, joined the team in the offseason, and how do you make that mesh in a locker room, you know what I mean? And then on the court, you've got to learn a whole new system. All of a sudden, you're basically starting from scratch. Do you think Alvin Gentry did a pretty good job in managing all of those players and getting them into a, I suppose, winning sort of mindset towards the end of the season?
Yeah. I mean, I've been a defender of Alvin Gentry, I feel like, in the, broadly speaking, with some of the other, some Pelicans fans out there. I think people were overly critical of him. I don't think he did a fantastic job by any stretch, but I think he did the best he could with what he had. And you can critique pretty much any coach for certain things, but I feel like Gentry, the role of the head coach, I feel like, and Seth Partnow of The Athletic put out a great article on this early in the season around what the role of a head coach actually is. And so there's so much behind the scenes that you will never see as a fan about what a head coach does. I think Alvin Gentry had a great coaching staff under him that gets, and I think most people would agree with that fact, but I feel like it matters more from an X and O's perspective. And what Gentry is the guy he's accountable, but he also is one who's dealing with the media. He's dealing with the locker room and having the hard conversations with players in some situations. And he's really good at that. And I think the players like him and respect him. And so I can't say enough about how he handled the entire AD situation a year ago. I mean, that was a disaster of a situation that he had to go through with the whole, fighting the league on whether or not they can sit him when he's already requested a trade, and it's just a mess. And so, like, that's what you need a head coach to be. Obviously, you need him to be someone who can, talk and know basketball, and that goes without saying. But given all of the stuff the Pelicans had to deal with, all of the injuries, the 13-game losing streak is inexcusable, and he has to take part of the lumps for that, even with an unhealthy team. I mean, in the tough schedule they played, no one's absolved of blame for losing that many games in a row. But at the same time, I feel like I think he did a decent job. That's not to say that he's the guy for them moving forward, but I would not be overly critical of him. And if you want to, but you look at Vegas. I mean, if you look at the Vegas over/under for this Pelicans team, it was I think it was like 38 wins, and that's even before the Zion injury happened to start the year. And so this team is on pace for that, at least, if not more. And I think I think he's done a pretty good job, all things considered.
Yeah, 100%. And it's always the case that these coaches, they lose a few games to begin with, and all of a sudden the hype starts going. Like you said, that Anthony Davis debacle ended with the "that's all, folks," and I suppose really had to go into damage control to make sure that the Pels didn't just get fined repeatedly for not playing him. You did make mention of Zion Williamson, the number 1 draft pick in this year's draft just gone. Huge amount of hype coming in, and then all of a sudden he is injured. Did that send shockwaves through, I suppose, the Pels fans generally as well as the team?
We're used to this, man. Are you kidding? Injuries? Oh, man. That's it. I wish it sent shockwaves, honestly, because that's just how the team works at this point. Guys get hurt. But, it was obviously a bummer. A bunch of fans bought season tickets immediately after the lottery, which 1 year ago today, weirdly enough. But it sucks, but at the same time, that you're not going to win a title this year. You're just excited to see him on the court. And so the question is, when are you going to see him? And that was that was a very much a TBD situation for a while. No one really knew, apart from the Pelicans, I guess, knew when he would see the floor. But I think at the very least, in the time we saw him on the floor, I don't think anyone could really be disappointed in what they saw. Even if you had sky-high expectations for him, I think he met them. So, I'm very similar to Lonzo. I'm excited to see how he can grow over the next year and hopefully throughout a long career in New Orleans.
Especially having those two guys playing together, because Lonzo can pull a pass from anywhere, and if he just throws it anywhere near the backboard, Zion's going to get hold of it. And those exciting sort of plays, and maybe even if a jump from Jackson Hayes comes as well, you've got two guys that you're just throwing the ball somewhere near the ring and they're putting it in. Zion looks like that guy that hopefully, I know that won't come up on the podcast, but I cross my fingers. We see this guy turn into an absolute alpha beast that we can build around for years to come. And if we can keep BI and keep Lonzo Ball, that's not a bad little trio there that you can build around when they're all only 22 and below or something like that. So it's exciting to see. Hopefully that chemistry continues to build. On other guys, I know Nicola Melli joined the team this year as well from the EuroLeague. What did you think of his season? He looks like he fits that mold of being able to play along Zion as well as playing along Derek Favors, but that defensive issues are probably something that he got criticised a little bit for.
Yeah, with Nico, I think everyone just by default, international stretch for that he's in the mold of the last Nico for this team, Mirotic, and so people want to connect those two, and I think they kind of are filling a very similar role. But I think with Melli, you had peaks and valleys with those two guys. Or with Melli, it was I remember watching I was in Atlanta for the first Zion preseason game. I think it was either Atlanta or Chicago, but I was there for it. And beyond Zion being incredible, the second thing I noticed was how much more Melly could do than I thought he would be able to do. I think his vision with the ball in his hands, passing was underrated. I thought he was pretty. Like, he had a couple of plays in isolation where he actually made things happen, with the ball, like dribbling to the basket. And so, and these are things that you wouldn't really expect for someone like him. And I had no idea what to expect. I didn't watch him play, overseas before he came to the NBA. And then the NBA regular season started, and he struggled. He went to the bench. He got some DNPs, but I think once Zion came in, he was a really nice complimentary big for him, and he got his confidence back. I think Gentry, to his credit, like all he does is tell Melly to shoot, keep shooting. We know you can make it. You can slump. That's okay. Teams are going to have to guard you, and that's going to cause trouble for the rest of the guys on our roster. And so, I also feel like he's better defensively than what he showed this year. The NBA is a significant adjustment for anyone. It's the best players in the world, and so I expect more from him there. Do I think he's ever going to be the guy who starts next to Zion? No, but I do think he's a guy who can fill a nice role for this team and help Zion space the floor and maximize his value until you find that guy who can really be the long-term starter alongside Zion.
And he joins a supporting cast of Josh Hart, Frank Jackson, Jackson Hayes, Kendrick Williams, and Etwan Moore. All of these guys have shown that they can play at this level. There's Jalil Okafor as well. I'm leaving guys out now. In those earlier games, these guys played some pretty significant minutes, and even when there was injuries throughout, I think we're pretty well placed on the bench as well. There's some pretty good guys, especially guys that are willing to sacrifice their games for the good of, I suppose, others. Kendrick Williams is mad hustle. Same thing with Frank Jackson's happy to go and do the dirty work, as well as Josh Hart. Do you think having a solid deep bench as well is key to the, I suppose, later season surge?
Yeah, I mean, like that was the line of thought for this team going into the year was they're definitely not as talented overall as they have been in recent years with AD and Drew leading the way, but they're also the deepest team that and of course injuries happen, but I feel like that was one of the things that people were most excited about is this team can go 9-10 deep and have one, while their starting lineup might not be that competitive at the top teams in the league, their second unit should be strong, and that's been a perpetual weakness for this team. And so, I think the guy to be most excited about of that second unit is Josh Hart. Really showed some things this year. I mean, he kind of bounced back from 3-point range. He's Mr. Hustle, kind of like Henrit. And the rebounding was critical from Josh Hart. I feel like the guy never stopped moving. He's all over the place, and I feel like that's something more than anything. His restricted free agency a year from now is something I'm very curious how it's going to play out. Do the Pelicans try to lock him in before that, or do they let that situation play out? Because I think he's a guy that, he has a really nice role on this Pelicans team. I feel like he contributed a lot to winning, but he's also a guy you want to tiptoe around and not necessarily drastically overpay. So I'm real curious to see what happens with him. But I think he's that good example. With Williams, I kind of felt the same way until he just crashed from distance. Like he lost all his confidence. He couldn't make anything or come anywhere close. It seemed like kind of like Lonzo sapped up not that Kenrich was that great of a 3-point shooter to begin with, but I feel like, when he turned down, Lonzo turned up, which was great for Lonzo, but and then obviously the injury to Williams didn't help either. But I feel like he was, as a new NBA era 4 off the bench, was really solid, and maybe silver lining, maybe he can keep him for the next couple of years at a cheaper price because of how he crashed so hard on, from 3-point range, because I'm not out on him yet. I really do want to see what he can do. And I feel like with NBA 3-point shooting, you can go, it's peaks and valleys so many times. And so I think there's so much to be excited about with some of the Pelicans bench guys. They're young guys. And, again, too bad we can't see a little bit more, right?
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, the whole team coming together and having this massive, I suppose, surge towards the end of the season, it shows that these guys have bought into this system. It's run and gun. I think it suits the young guys. They can run people off the court almost. Before we say our goodbyes, I'd like to know your key takeaways from the season and your expectations, I suppose, for the next season or once we leave hiatus. I'd just like to get your thoughts on those.
Yeah, I mean, high level, I feel like, first of all, and this is top of mind because we talked about it on the podcast last night, was don't expect serious waves in the offseason. I don't think this team is positioned to do much of it beyond Ingram re-signing, and I think they'll get that deal done in restricted free agency. So that's a big piece, obviously, keeping Brandon Ingram. But beyond that, I don't see much happening. This team's going to be probably operating over the cap. They may use their exceptions. They'll either keep Favors or they'll find a big who can replicate a lot of what Favors is doing for the Pelicans. So I just want to level set expectations on. There's not going to be any big waves, I don't think. They'll bring DD over. So I think that's I assume they'll bring DD over. So he'll be kind of a guy who you can expect to get hopefully some rotation minutes next season. But I feel pretty good. They're the only disappointment I'd say from the season as far as their long-term outlook. I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker, after the summer league and the preseason he had a rough rookie year, and so I'm certainly not out on him, but I think that he's got more. Yeah, he's got to make it. He's got to prove himself to get minutes, and I do think he could have taken some of Frank Jackson's minutes this year, but I do think. Because I'm all the way out on Frank Jackson, but I think the team wanted to make damn sure that they were out on Frank Jackson too. And I don't see him being a part of this team moving forward, but I understand why they played him over Nickeil, because Nickeil's a rookie. You've got time with him. Alexander Walker is the only, I think, the real negative where I was disappointed to see him play in the regular season versus what he did before that. But yeah, I mean, like Lonzo turned it on. That I'm excited to see him next year and continue to grow. Ingram obviously took major strides this year. Josh Hart struggled to start the year and then took strides kind of similar to Lonzo. Josh Hart's struggles were not as pronounced. I would say maybe he was just kind of okay to start the year, and then he really grew into the role that he played for the Pelicans. And Jackson Hayes, we haven't talked about him, but I think he was kind of took people by surprise in how quickly everyone thought he was a redshirt. Essentially, he wouldn't play at all this year. He was forced into playing because of injuries, but he did a damn good job for a frail 19-year-old who's still growing into his NBA body. And so that'll be another fun piece to watch. So, I mean, all things considered, I feel like there's a ton of reasons to be excited. I just want to temper expectations, not just for the summer, but also this team isn't going to grow into a playoff contender overnight. It's going to take time. But they have time to figure it out and figure out which of these young pieces fit and which ones don't. So patience is key, which I think Pelicans fans are tired of hearing because of all the injuries and all the things they've had to deal with already. But I think now more than ever, there's reason to be patient because you can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And even if that's not a title, that's a team that I think can be good together for a decent amount of time, which I don't think this city has seen for basketball since like the Chris Paul, David West era, which is, it's a while.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Diddy there. We've been watching him out at the Sydney Kings this year as one of our NBL Next stars. So he torched my Wildcats a couple of times. And so I'm looking forward to seeing him take the lead. Fortunately, he couldn't get the championship in the end. That was the Wildcats. So we're happy with that result. But unfortunately, for him. But his English has taken some real strides. I think he was really struggling with it, I think, earlier on. And even his game has just developed. And there was the Sydney Kings fans were all over him there. Mason, I'd really like to thank you for spending some time with us today and chatting Pelicans. It's been really insightful, and I appreciate your time. We'd love to have you on again sometime. Do you have anything you'd like to shout out before we wrap it up?
No, this is I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me. Listeners, check out our site, bourbonstreetshots.com. Obviously, not a ton of content coming out right now, but we are, so my co-host and I, who you've had on, Shamit Dua and I do a usually weekly podcast in the know. It's been a little more sporadic given the lack of basketball, but we're still, we've got some episodes coming out. So definitely, if you're craving more Pelicans podcast content, check us out too, in the know.
Head over there and do it. Mason, I'd like to thank you again, and we'll speak to you next time.
Sounds good.
So how good was that? We got a really good chat with Mason. That was a couple of weeks ago now, as I said in the intro. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. A guy that is all the way across the Pelicans, and we look forward to speaking with him into the future. Make sure you head over and check out the bourbonstreetshots.com. Their podcast, as well as In the Know. Very, very insightful. We talked to Shamit, as he alluded to, a couple of weeks ago as well. A reminder that this was recorded back in the end of May, so a few things have changed since then. The NBA is coming back. We're excited. We're looking forward to it, and we'll keep getting these podcasts out everywhere that you can get podcasts. So, guys, thanks again. I am Lyle Swithenbank, as always, at Lyle Swithenbank on Twitter. This has been the Pelicans Scoop, at Hoopball Pels on Twitter, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.